As I turned towards the voice, I found John and his mother standing there, their expressions laden with disdain. "What's going on here?" I asked, puzzled. "We're moving in with Mom. We tossed out your stuff. If you don't like it, leave," John's mother retorted, her tone sharp. "Yeah, we don't need a daughter-in-law who doesn't care about her husband." "Get out now," John added, his voice dripping with contempt. "And we don't need that unattractive grandchild of yours either." As I opened my mouth to speak about the house, I hesitated. Maybe driving them out wasn't such a bad idea after all. "Well, you're going to regret this later," I muttered under my breath. "My name is Alyssa Thompson, a 35-year-old working housewife. I live with my husband John and our son Michael, who's in first grade. Just an ordinary housewife like many out there, except I had grown up in a wealthy family. Despite our wealth, we lived modestly, trying to avoid attention and potential demands for money. John and I both worked at the same company, but I had joined later and risen through the ranks faster. Our marriage had been fine initially, but after tying the knot, John began to resent the difference in our status. He faced ridicule at work and rumors circulated that he was under my control. Despite his frustration, I never blamed him. However, his attitude soared further during my maternity leave. "Must be nice to get money without working," he'd sneer during my time off. And when I returned to work, he'd remind me, "I'm the one supporting you. You better remember that." It was true that I received paid maternity leave, but his resentment seemed to grow as if he couldn't bear the idea of me having financial security without actively working. But in exchange, women risk their lives to give birth. Child care leave is unpaid time off to take care of the child. I was grateful to John for supporting me during that time. Originally, I appreciated John for accepting our dual income setup and for splitting the living expenses fairly. So, there was no need for him to flaunt his dominance. I was saddened by John's change in attitude. After I returned to work from child care leave, our relationship started to strain. John began to neglect my son and me. The deposits into our joint living expenses account gradually decreased until John's contributions hit zero. Even after I returned to work, he didn't lift a finger around the house or help with child rearing. Perhaps he used to feel superior, but now that I've gone back to work, his sense of superiority has been challenged. At work, since I'm the boss, there are times I have to be strict even with my husband regarding matters within my purview. This includes things like business-related warnings, but I try my best to do it discreetly, away from the eyes of other employees. I wonder if John thought I should overlook things simply because he's my husband. I try to act naturally, but it seems even that doesn't sit well with him. I'm always wondering how we can become a harmonious family again. What bothers me just as much as John's attitude is the presence of my mother-in-law, Kate. She's one of those mothers-in-law who adores her son and constantly criticizes everything I do, never missing a chance to put me down. When we got married, she even criticized me for having a higher position at work than John. Oh my, for a woman to claim she's a manager higher than John. What was she thinking? How could a woman like that even think of marrying my dear John? Women should be modest, walking behind their husbands. Such a dated view on women, and Kate shouted it out loud. I'll never forget that shock, especially since John started to ignore me and Michael. Kate's snide comments have gotten worse. Maybe John, when visiting his family home, filled Kate's ears with bad stories about me. Even when I reported going back to work, Kate's sarcasm was relentless. Leaving such a small child and going to work. Don't you have any maternal feelings? Oh, right, a child born to a woman like you can't be cute. And she didn't even bother with Michael after saying that. Being her direct grandson and a boy at that, I thought Michael would at least be doted on by her. But that wasn't the case. I feel so sorry for Michael, treated poorly just because I am his mother. Michael doesn't talk about his father or grandmother. Being in first grade, he must have sensed the ill will directed at him by his father and grandmother. My parents absolutely adore him. My parents absolutely adore Michael. They love him so much that they often say they could eat him up and not feel a thing. They've made and played with toys together. participated in events like making s'mores at campfires, and always engaged in conversations with him, listening to his stories with a smile. Due to their warm relationship, Michael seems to prefer being at my parents' home over our own. He frequently stays there for extended periods, especially during summer breaks. It's interesting to observe how different the two sets of grandparents can be. Lately, I've been grappling with John's suspicious behavior. After work, he spends a considerable amount of time at his mother Kate's place, seemingly engrossed in some secret activity. Since John's father passed away not long after our marriage, Kate now lives alone. Despite this, she appears thrilled whenever John visits, fussing over him and providing meals and showers. While this means less workload for me, I can't shake off this nagging feeling of apprehension. What could John be plotting? The only thought crossing my mind is that he might be contemplating moving in with Kate. Kate has always expressed a keen interest in living with John. Every time the topic of moving in together arose, I remember her glaring at me as if I were the enemy. During the earlier, stronger phase of our relationship, John used to firmly reject the idea, assuring me it would just be Alyssa and me. However, since he started asserting dominance, his closeness to Kate has increased. It seems he now wants to live with her, someone firmly on his side, and perhaps intends to further belittle me. Currently, I'm the one managing the living expenses for myself, John, and Michael. Despite earning more than John and having some inheritance from my family, we aren't financially struggling. However, my desire has always been to live solely on the money we earn, without relying on inherited assets. That's why I haven't disclosed the details of the inheritance to John. I wonder what he's doing with his salary. Perhaps he's spending it on his hobbies or trying to please Kate. I really don't want to live with Kate. I don't want to be constantly nagged at, and I certainly don't want Michael to be ignored or verbally abused at home. It's sad that John doesn't pay attention to Michael, but that's still better than him facing outright hostility. If we move in together, it's going to be like walking on eggshells. Lost in thought, I muttered to myself. Suddenly, Michael overheard me. "Mom, what does moving in mean?" I was taken aback, realizing that Michael was right next to me while I was lost in thought. "I'm sorry, I was just thinking." "Tell me, Michael, how would you feel if we started living with your dad's mom?" Michael is a smart kid. It's better to inform him somewhat than trying to hide everything. After pondering my question for a moment, he replied, "Grandma Kate. If we're going to live with a grandma, I prefer your parents. Grandma Kate doesn't talk to me." Seeing the sadness in Michael's eyes hurt. He must have wanted attention from Kate, even though she's the way she is. This made me both sad and angry. How could she treat her own grandchild this way? One day, as these concerns weighed on me, something decisive happened. When I returned home from work, Michael rushed out to me. Mom, Dad's doing a strange thing." Seeing how flustered Michael was, I had a sinking feeling. What happened? What did your dad do? Michael pointed to the garden from the front door. Looking at the garden Michael pointed to, I couldn't believe my eyes. My clothes, books, Michael's clothes, and school supplies were all thrown into the yard. "Hey, what's this about?" As I stood in shock before the pile of clothes and books, I heard John's laughter. Surprised, I turned towards the voice. There stood John and his mother, Kate. Still not believing the scene before me, I asked John, "Hey, what's going on here? Not just my stuff, but Michael's too. I know you don't like me. It might take time to forgive. But if you call it harassment, well, I guess I can understand. But Michael's just a kid in elementary school. What on earth are you and Kate thinking, dragging him into this mess?" I felt my blood boiling in anger. To my question, John and Kate snorted in response. "Because my mom's going to live with us. I threw out your stuff. If you don't like it, leave. Yeah, we don't need a wife who doesn't care for her husband. Leave and take that not-so-cute grandson you gave birth to with you." John and Kate laughed loudly. Something inside me snapped. Not content with just tossing my things, they threw Michael's out too. And to say in front of Michael that he's not cute and not wanted was enough. I've been patient for too long. "All right then, To my response, John and Kate were overjoyed, grinning. They spoke loudly. Now you see how important I am? No matter how high and mighty you act, without me, you can't get by. Exactly. It must be hard for a clueless wife like you, thinking you're better when you should be following your husband. It's pitiful, really. I let off a deep sigh. Michael and I will leave. I assume this means you want a divorce. At my question, John exclaimed with delight. Don't like it? If you don't kneel down, beg, and say you'll serve me, and don't forget to act humble at work, then maybe I'll reconsider the divorce. No need. I'll go to the lawyer's office by tomorrow. As I responded calmly, John looked taken aback. What? You're sure about the divorce? You set it up this way with this stunt. Did he think I'd cry and beg? Clearly flustered by my unwavering stance, John was at a loss for words. Seeing this, Kate chimed in. Why are you being so arrogant? John's offering kind words, and you ignore him. You're really an infuriating daughter-in-law. I replied as I picked up the clothes thrown in the yard. I'd always tried to support you in my own way. But it seems you never noticed. That's it. I don't want to be with someone who doesn't value Michael and me. Michael was quietly gathering his clothes and school supplies. I couldn't imagine how painful it must have been for him, still in elementary school, to have his belongings thrown away by his father and Kate. I didn't show it, but I was seething with anger. In the midst of all this, I suddenly remembered something about our house contract. There was a special clause in our lease. But as I started to talk about the house, I realized something and stopped. Maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to use this to get back at these two. Well, y'all are probably going to regret this later. Not my problem anymore, I said. John seemed frustrated that things weren't going his way. He repeatedly hurled insults at me. With our belongings packed, Michael and I left our home. Later on, carrying our essentials, Michael and I took shelter at my parents' home. They were shocked by John and Kate's behavior, but were happy to take us in. Michael was thrilled to see his grandparents, whom he adored. I needed to finalize the divorce. Leaving Michael with my parents, I started thinking about the next steps. Then I consulted a lawyer who had been a longtime acquaintance of my family. Having dealt with financial matters for a long time, he was experienced in divorce cases involving monetary disputes. The most important thing was child support for Michael. While I could support Michael on my own, I intended for John to uphold his responsibilities as a father. The next day, I returned to our former home with the lawyer. At our old place, John was quickly setting up to live with Kate. Kate, with a wide grin, greeted us. I laid out the divorce papers on the table for John to sign. He quickly filled them out, seemingly eager to be free. Then, the lawyer started explaining the child support. The mention of child support made John and Kate erupt. Child support? I've been embarrassed because of you, and now I have to pay. What a pitiful woman. All you think about is taking money from John. John, you don't owe her a dime, was Kate's predictable reaction, regardless of what they thought. Michael is John's son and your grandchild, Kate. I'll go to court if necessary. At my words, John stood up in anger, but the lawyer calmed him down and explained the reasonableness of the amount. Damn it. If we didn't work at the same company, I could have handled this differently, John muttered in frustration. Of course, since we work at the same place, if word got out that John was dodging child support, it'd be a scandal. To which I added, oh, speaking of which, now that we've got the divorce papers, we're nothing to each other. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to treat you just like any other employee. Now that you're not my husband, I don't have to protect your image. Upon hearing this, John went pale. That's right. To protect his image as my husband. I used to give him feedback privately or subtly within our casual conversations. But the truth is, John isn't that competent in his job. He gets scolded almost daily by other supervisors. Seems he finally realized how much I'd shielded him from. Now he'll be scolded by his ex-wife too, and he'll be laughed at and looked down upon by other employees. Imagining that, he fell silent. After the divorce was finalized, I started taking measures against John and Kate. First, I transferred all the bills I've been covering, like rent and utilities, to John. Then, I sent him an eviction notice. Hey, what's this eviction notice? Why is it coming in your name? A few days later, John called after receiving the eviction notice. Well, it was time for the lease renewal, and I decided not to renew it. Even if you wanted to continue, I decline. It's a house I'm renting out under my name, so it makes sense, doesn't it? What? It's under your name. It was clear from the other side of the phone that John was flabbergasted. In fact, the house he had been living in was under my name. I inherited it as part of my assets and had been renting it out. I wasn't sure what kind of reactions I'd get if John or my former mother-in-law, Kate, found out it was under my name. They might start to rely on the assets and passive income one possesses, especially John. He'd probably quit his job and live a lavish lifestyle, and Kate would likely spend, as if saying, "My daughter-in-law's money is my money." So, I had been effectively paying rent to myself. Well, if it's your house, there shouldn't be a problem with me living there. We're married after all. Married? What are you talking about? I already filed for divorce. You and I are complete strangers now. I'm not the type to let a complete stranger live in my house for no reason. Please move out by the specified date. Finally, doubt crept into John's words. Hold on. What do you mean your house? Even if you hold a higher position than me, you're just another employee. Moreover, this is the house we lived in since we got married. Well, maybe you didn't notice because I never told you, but my family has always been wealthy. We own various properties like lands and condos, and some are under my name. At my words, John seemed to be taken aback. The ex-wife he always saw as a foe was, in fact, a wealthy heiress with properties. Yet she still worked, and if he was with her, he'd never have to worry about money. Maybe thinking that, John flipped his stance. Hey, Alyssa, can we give it another try? This time I'm going to treat you right, and we won't live with my mom. What do you say? Quite the about-face. Who would want to start over after all that? Letting it all out, I let him have it. You think I'd ever reconsider things with someone who changes their attitude on a dime? You always said how humiliated you felt because I had a better job and earned more. It's over. I'm moving away from such a person. Good for you. No more shame to bear. I yelled with all I had and hung up. That felt good. I couldn't wait to see what happens with John and Kate. From then on, things seemed to have gone downhill for John and Kate. They struggled to find a new place to live. While I gave them some time before the eviction, they dragged their feet and didn't bother finding a new place. So after the eviction, they had to look for a place while carrying all their stuff. Apparently, it looked pretty ridiculous. Some of our colleagues even saw it, and word spread about them getting kicked out of their house. And now, he had to face me at work. John seemed deeply humiliated. Damn it, if Alyssa would just reconsider, I wouldn't have to go through this. Maybe I should quit this uncomfortable job and move to another company. But quitting wasn't easy for John. He had chosen to live with Kate, which meant he had to cover living expenses for both of them now. For John, who had been relying on me for living expenses for years, it would be tough. Almost all of his income would now go to bills, and he seemed super stressed. Even Kate, who he was once close with, their relationship soared. She had been hoping for a relaxed life, having me handle all the household chores, but that dream was shattered with the divorce. John, who lives with her, covers the living expenses, so Kate must handle the household chores now. It seems he's been making snide remarks towards John. He's such a useless son, doesn't earn much, lets a wife who can both earn well and do chores slip away, and makes me do the housework. What, it's your fault, Alyssa, and I got divorced. If it weren't for you. What'd you just say? How can you say that to your own mother? John has to pay child support for Michael. After paying the child support from his not-so-high salary, he doesn't have much left. He has to live on that small amount. Now that he no longer has the financial security he used to, it seems John and Kate are fighting daily. They might split up and end up living lonely lives on their own. But whatever happens, it's none of my business. In front of his colleagues, John probably couldn't ask me for help. He'd just be ridiculed, clinging to his discarded ex-wife, begging for assistance. I chuckled at the thought. Since then, I've been living in a small apartment near my parents' home with Michael. Life is easier, both financially and mentally, without John and Kate around. Michael's face has brightened a lot. When I come home, he rushes to me right away. Mom, today at school. Hold on, sweetie. Wash your hands and put your backpack away first, then tell me all about it. He chats a lot with me and my parents. Seeing Michael smile, I feel good about the divorce and regret keeping him in that environment. Before, I used to be preoccupied with my relationship with John and Kate, not thinking about the future. But now I can live for a clear goal, Michael's happiness. I've realized the importance of relationships with those around you. Michael, are you getting along with your friends? No one's being mean or anything. Yeah, I'm good. Everyone's nice. And if someone says something wrong, they apologize, and everyone forgives. Even kids know how to be considerate and apologize. I'll try not to act rude.